Just a few weeks ago, Deep Purple released their new album, Equals One, and it's actually really solid. So I've been familiar with Deep Purple for a long time. I mean, maybe not like quite a few years now, I guess, but it wasn't really until recently that I went through their catalog. Their late 60s stuff is good, but I mean, kind of inaccessible. It's weird, experimental, psychedelic, whatever. All their 70s albums, except for Stormbringer, are really, really good. Now, this is a controversial opinion, at least I'm pretty sure it is, but I did not like, and I don't like, Perfect Strangers. I don't like that album, like, at all. I don't like any of the songs off it. I don't think it's that good, and the same thing goes with the rest of their 80s and early 90s stuff up to The Battle Rages On. That period is like, there's not a single good song from that period, in my opinion. I know a lot of people really like Perfect Strangers, and I mean, I can kind of see why, but I just can't get into it, no matter how many times I listen to it. So yeah. Now, then Ritchie Blackmore left for the second and final time, and the band hired Steve Morse and released Perpendicular. It was the band's best album since the 70s, since Come Taste the Band in particular at that point, and everything they released since then has actually been really solid. So with that being said, I had pretty good expectations for this album. Now, initially, I wasn't really too crazy about Deep Purple's last two albums, Infinite and Whoosh, and I didn't listen to their new covers album, Turning to Crime, but then I heard the single Portable Door, and I liked it a lot. I listened to the album on the day it came out, and I actually really enjoyed it. So here's the thing about newer Deep Purple. It's incredibly solid material, but I will admit that whenever I hear their newer albums, it just makes me want to go back and listen to their 70s stuff even more. In a nutshell, I wouldn't necessarily choose to listen to new Deep Purple, even though I like enjoy it and it is good music. That being said, with this album, I felt slightly different. I was actually wanting to go back and revisit it, which usually doesn't really happen with a lot of newer albums being released. But the other day I listened through it a second time, and I think I like it even more now. So Equals One is the first Deep Purple album with new guitarist Simon McBride, who joined the band after longtime guitarist Steve Morse left in 2022. Now, I don't know what it is with Deep Purple getting new guitarists, but every time the band brings in a new one, they sound refreshed and new. This happened with Perpendicular, with Ritchie Blackmore leaving and bringing in Steve Morse. Like, it was a completely new, refreshing sound. And like the amount, like the jump in quality from The Battle Rages On to like Perpendicular is insane. So recently, Deep Purple, they were starting to sound stagnant and ready to like call it quits with their last few albums. But bring in a new guitarist, and with this album, they almost sound like they could like continue for like another 20 years, or at least 15 years. Simon McBride was a great choice for a new guitarist, as he does a great job with his solos and riffs on the album. And the other members of the band all sound great as well. It's particularly Don Airey, and his keys really work well in lockstep with Simon McBride's guitar playing. It just, I don't know, it works really well together, and that's always been a thing I've enjoyed about Deep Purple is like, you know, the organ sound with the guitar parts. Not to mention, also, Ian Gillan's vocals in particular here sound really, really crisp and clean. The same thing goes with the mix for the album overall. The mix for the album is great, which, like I mentioned, every instrument sounds really nice, clean. You can hear everything clearly. So the album opens up with the track Show Me. The first three songs on the album are great and really set up the vibe for the album. Not to mention that Show Me is actually a really strong opener. Then it goes into Portable Door. As I mentioned before, it was the first thing I heard from the album. It was the lead single, and I must say that Deep Purple really, really chose some strong singles this time around. The other two were Pictures of You and Lazy Sod, at least the ones that were released before the album. Both songs are great. I'll Catch You is the penultimate track on the album. It's a bit slower, more of like a ballad type song with like piano and stuff. And the closing track, Bleeding Obvious, is a longer jam, which Deep Purple is somewhat known for. I'm pretty sure it's the longest song on the album. It's almost like 6 minutes or something, which isn't really that long, but you know, it's more like a jam type. Now, I don't think there's a single bad song on the album, but a couple of the songs are kinda sorta forgettable. Other than that, I only really have one like true complaint about the album, and it's not even about the music. Deep Purple is incredibly lazy with their album covers at times. I mean, just take a look at Perpendicular or Now What. This one is no exception. I mean, I could have made this in MS Paint for like, it would take me less than a minute to do that. They could have at least done something slightly more interesting. Overall, I'd give the album about an 8 out of 10 or 3.5 stars out of 5. It's a solid album. There's nothing inherently bad about it, but again, some of the songs are somewhat forgettable, and they could have done a much better job with the album cover. But on the flip side, the mix is great, and in contrast to the forgettable songs, there are also some really strong songs on the album. Those are just my thoughts, though. I just want to hear what you guys think. Should Deep Purple keep going? Should they retire, pack it up, or call it quits? Or should they continue to tour and record, you know? Let me know. I will also be seeing them with Yes, hopefully, towards the end of August. So that should be fun if I'm going. I'm not sure if I'm gonna go or not. Also, expect more album reviews. I still want to cover some of the albums that were released this year that I didn't get to, especially the new High on Fire and Fu Manchu albums. Both albums were great and like are some of the band's like best albums in years. Opeth also just announced their new album, The Last Will and Testament, so expect to see a review of that when it comes out in October. Until then, stay metal, my friends.